It's no secret that the region is dry, so dry that parts are under a drought. With these dry conditions also comes concerns about the long term. Meteorologist Connor Thompson spoke with the Northeast Climate Center to learn more about what impacts we could see if the dry weather continues into the winter months.
Since the beginning of meteorological fall on September 1st, the region has been the third driest on record. While the summer months had plenty of rain, the current weather pattern has made our area see drier than normal conditions.
October was record dry for some places across the region and just very little precipitation. And that's really followed into November as well. We've been in a pattern of weather where we just haven't gotten much precipitation. We've also seen quite a few days with above normal temperatures as well. So we just had this dry and warm weather being pretty consistent.
Climatologist Jessica Spaccio says that droughts in this area happen every 2 to 3 years, so they aren't uncommon. But what's unusual about this drought is the timing. She says that if the dry weather continues into the winter months, more water issues could pop up across the southern tier.
One of the concerns is that as the ground freezes, as we do hopefully get some precipitation coming, that it won't recharge the groundwater because with that frozen ground, it prohibits that recharge.
While it is uncertain to know what exactly winter might bring in terms of precipitation, in the scenario of the drier weather continuing, that puts the area at a higher risk of more wildfires come springtime.
We normally are worried about the flooding, but also dry times and fire risk. If we don't get enough of that precipitation that we need over winter, we could be setting ourselves up for a dry and high fire risk in the spring.
The lack of water in some area waterways like the Susquehanna River behind me here is cause for concern because there is the possibility of some ecological impacts on certain fish like trout come springtime.
A lot of ecological impacts. I've heard some reports from DEC about worrying about trout populations and where some of those trout eggs and fish are now for kind of spring fishing. So it could have an effect on that.
Connor Thompson, 12 News, Broome County.